Cartoon Network was just the biggest source of nostalgia in my life. There's no way I can't talk about it.
Masses of titles, hours of fun, available now.
Yep, masses of titles, only 2 of which I've ever owned, and we're looking at one of them. That just shows how little I watched when it came to preschool entertainment. My eyes were elsewhere. If you had a VCR in the 1990s and you had a channel of your favourites, whether it be Disney, Cartoon Network or any of the Nick channels, and you had some recordable videos, you were set for life. Disney, Nick and Cartoon Network were the way to go. By the time it ended, I was well into my Cartoon Network period, so I had no issues whatsoever. I wasn't allowed to watch Ed, Edd n Eddy, but I had plenty to work with. Speaking of Cartoon Network, let's talk briefly about Super Chunk, a weekly event in both Britain and America. But forget about Super Chunk, there was something else on Cartoon Network, something for kids every week.
Come join the fun at Cartoon Network, where cartoons live.
The Toon City era was launched on UK Cartoon Network in April 2005. Cartoon Network proceeded to air 2 of my least favourite cartoons, The Cramp Twins and Gadget Boy. For my opinions on Gadget Boy, I refer you to this video. I wake up in the morning, all straight back to Cartoon Network, CN2 and Toon Disney/Disney Cinemagic. January 2011 hits, and Cartoon Network goes under pretty radical rejuvenation. These days, I'd be cool with how Cartoon Network is right now if I could just have those 2 hours back. I've been a lover for Cartoon Network for nearly 20 years, and Ed, Edd n Eddy is my favourite cartoon of all time. As for Christmas TV, I always turned my eyes to Cartoon Network and occasionally Disney. Sorry boys, VCI wins in the logo department every time. Unless we're talking about Cartoon Network, childhood beats early 21st century every time. Speaking of no evidence, let's talk once more about Cartoon Network. Did I watch it here? I don't know, but knowing my extensive history with Cartoon Network, I would not be surprised in the absolute slightest if that were the case. Although to be fair, my mind was elsewhere at the time. 4 words, kids.
This is Cartoon Network.
It's June 2005, and I had just spent a weekend in Lochgelly, thus recording 8 hours of Cartoon Network. I turn on Nick Jr. just for the hell of it, and this is what I see. Jesus, we've covered a lot here. And a fair bit of it was relating to Cartoon Network. Tom and Jerry could easily be the first cartoon I ever watched. This was definitely there before we had on digital, which is when Cartoon Network began to take over my life. It was a long and arduous process, but it was all complete by 2005. If I had to compare it to something non-Thomas related, it would have to be the Toon City period of Cartoon Network. Considering how much I watched Cartoon Network in those days, I easily took to the city look. My daily TV schedule revolves around Cartoon Network and occasional half-hour switches to Cartoon Network 2, Boomerang, Toon Disney and later Disney Cinemagic, the successor to Toon Disney. Now, when I was young and I wasn't playing with this really and I wasn't watching Cartoon Network at odd hours of the night, I had a fair few videos to amuse me. These 2 videos, along with 2 videos of Cartoon Network, are all that remains of my Lochgelly video collection. Nothing was on, I couldn't sleep, I had the living room TV to myself, late night Cartoon Network wasn't working for me and wouldn't truly be working for another year or so. So last time I talked about Disney and I had a happy time. Whenever I talk about Cartoon Network, I usually have a good time. I believe it to be the first cartoon related video in my entire collection, arriving long before Cartoon Network. So in the past, I've covered Cartoon Network a hell of a lot. Around this time, it's my belief that the owners and operators of Cartoon Network were trying to modernise and update the channel. Cartoon Network runs the modern and new content, and this thing runs the classic stuff. You know, I can talk about it a million times and I will never get sick of cartoons. That nightly 2-hour block was just my heaven. That clip from D-Dimensional is one of my earliest memories from Cartoon Network, dating back to the turn of the new millennium, an absolute fantastic time for TV. Almost everything I cover relates to my youth. Thomas and Friends, Singing Kettle, Cartoon Network, Sonic the Hedgehog, those are 4 main areas of my childhood. Do I still have them? No, I grew up. My attention had shifted towards that black and white logo. With all these talks about Cartoon Network, where would I be if I didn't mention Scooby-Doo? I'm sleeping over at his house, I'm 4 years old, Cartoon Network is still relatively unknown to me, and of course, VHS is still popular. Hey, you know what I've not talked about enough? My love for Cartoon Network. More specifically, my love for Cartoon Network from 2005 to 2010. I could definitely talk about that more. But you know what? The service offered Cartoon Network, so I remained happy. Think about that. I now had 24/7 Cartoon Network from my own bedroom. When I think back to those early days of Cartoon Network, 2 points jump out at me. At some point it was broadcast on Cartoon Network, go figure. As we've established, we have 5 obscure cartoons running on late night Cartoon Network. When it comes to Cartoon Network and Disney and such, I've talked a lot about children's programming. When you think about how much I watched Cartoon Network in those days, it could not have taken much for Wacky Races to win me over. TV can only get you so far. Cartoon Network and Disney were still in their infancies. Dig It is only on at the weekends. We've told some Disney stories, some Cartoon Network stories, and some Michelangelo stories.
His name's not...
No, shut up! It could very well explain why I still have fond memories of singing Kettle Pirates, or Chases, Races and Runaways, or even those recorded videos of Cartoon Network. When Cartoon Network became the big focus in my life, like most things, Piggy took a back seat for a while. The first problem was Cartoon Network. As I've stated millions of times before, and as I will state for many more times to come, I was in the midst of my Cartoon Network period. I did once watch a 5-hour marathon on Cartoon Network back in 2008, but because I'm a massive fucking idiot, I never recorded it onto video or DVD. At this point, I had on digital, and thus access to Cartoon Network, so I'm willing to bet I was watching. And then there's this, Smelly Telly. It was a weird gimmick run by European Cartoon Network in May 2000. Season 1 airs from 1999 to 2000 on very primitive Cartoon Network. The worst bit about this is that On Digital had gone bankrupt at this point, so I no longer had the luxury of Cartoon Network in my bedroom. At this point, it's 2005, I'm 12 years old, and cartoons were running late at night on Cartoon Network every night at 11 PM. Happy, happy times. Flash forward to 2006, and we approach what I consider to be my favourite period of Cartoon Network. So now I can watch Cartoon Network whenever I wanted, without interruptions. It feels so good. I don't quite recall these airing on Cartoon Network at any point. If they did, I must have missed them. I was still watching daily cartoon content between 3 Cartoon Network channels and 2 Disney channels. I can safely say that this is one of the greatest things ever produced for Cartoon Network. One of the biggest shows Cartoon Network has ever featured. I've stated the obvious multiple times before, but Cartoon Network was my life in those days. It all lasted until 2011, when Cartoon Network underwent a massive reboot. See, that Cartoon Network series is massive. Everyone knows it. Almost everyone loves it. Eventually, my Dig It period died off around 2001 as Cartoon Network developed a larger presence in my life. Dig It ran for barely 4 hours over a 2-day weekend, whilst Cartoon Network ran for 24 hours every day of the week. Cartoon Network controlled my life at that point. If we're talking about classic Cartoon Network, one show we can never overlook is Animaniacs. I have more memories of this than I do from watching it on Cartoon Network. Apparently this movie came to life due to Scooby-Doo being incredibly popular on Cartoon Network in the 90s. Forget what they say about Boomerang, it all comes back to Cartoon Network. There was a Cartoon Network comic. I have been a massive fan of that channel since the late 90s, since On Digital was a thing. I miss Cartoon Network.
I'm all out of love, I'm so lost without you.
So many times in this series I've praised Cartoon Network and what it offered me on a nightly basis from 2005 to 2010. On October 1st, 1992, Cartoon Network was launched. It was the start of something awesome. I'm a massive Cartoon Network fan, as well as a massive Tom and Jerry lover, and then re-recorded from Cartoon Network in December 2000. So the first thing we see is the Cartoon Network logo reacting to fart sounds. It was the 90s, fart jokes were cool. Dragon Ball Z is the most overrated thing I've ever seen on Cartoon Network. As much as I loved Cartoon Network, that shit was pricey. The satellite box alone could cost upwards of £200. And Cartoon Network wasn't even a Freeview channel, so that's an additional £11 per month for the primary channels. Everyone has a source of nostalgia in their life, and for me, it's my rather extensive VHS collection. Thompson Friends, Singing Kettle, Cartoon Network, and a lot more.